Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Community Platform, only on uctv.co.uk. Before we begin today's session, I just want to thank our sponsors very quickly, not too quickly though. First Stop Vehicle Solutions, we're very grateful. SG9 Security, companyforsale.co.uk, First Qibla Tours, Brownhill Corporate Hire, Longreach Coaches, Executive Travel. We're very grateful, thank you. Now let's begin with our guest, and today's subject is an important subject. We're talking about mental health and young people. We have someone who's not only an expert on mental health, but of course she works with the young people. We have lots of questions. We're trying to understand, what do we actually mean by mental health? Who does it impact? What are the causes? And what is our understanding? Because when you think about mental health, even the legal definition is very fuzzy. So there's confusion at points. But I'm sure that my guest today is going to rectify all that today. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited.
You're going to help us to understand everything today.
I will try my best.
You will do. Sarah, I'm going to introduce you as you work with Associated Wellbeing.
Yes, that's correct.
It's I believe an organisation which is relatively new.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Associated Wellbeing, it was set up a couple of years ago now. And we started off following a green paper which came out. So a green paper was published, and it recognised and identified that there was a huge need within schools for young people requiring input from mental health professionals. Mm-hmm. And it identified that there was a big gap in service. So we read the paper and we thought, what can we do about this? So Associated Wellbeing was set up, and we started to work in local schools. So we worked in both mainstream schools and also social, emotional and mental health schools. And we were really fortunate to secure some contracts within social, emotional and mental health schools. And we were working, filling a gap, doing assessment, formulation and intervention. We also started working in some mainstream schools because what was identified by the teachers is that they had some school refusers, or young people who were declining to attend school, and they'd employed us to assess the young people, work with them, find out if there was any underlying mental health difficulties that were becoming a barrier to them accessing school, and then for us to work with them to try and encourage them to return. And we actually had a 100% success rate with those individuals. Mm-hmm. So those schools that were investing in that service were fantastic, because they were really investing in them young people and not wanting to just write them off and say, well, they're not coming, they skew our figures and that's the end of it. Mm-hmm. They really wanted to try and understand what was the barrier to them coming back. So that was one part of our work. And it's really exciting to hear that there's an NHS trailblazer that's just been funded as well, that's going to put in some young people's health and wellbeing practitioners within local schools as well, from the NHS service, which is really highly needed.
Yes.
So that's one element of what the company started to do. And then another part of the service is that we were doing private consultations. So we offered a service whereby if somebody was worried about a young person, so a parent, carer, was worried about their child, and they felt like they couldn't get an adequate service, or they didn't meet the threshold for CAMHS, because obviously CAMHS is a specialist service. They have thresholds, and sometimes children fall in between that gap. There's lots of fantastic charity provision and things around, but they're oversubscribed, they have long waiting lists, and we were offering a very quick access private consultation service. So it was an option for parents to pay and have that immediate access to a mental health specialist who would then work on a one-to-one basis with their young person. And we've continued doing that now. We have some ongoing cases where we work quite intensively with certain young people in the community. And again, we've had some really, really fantastic success rates.
Whilst you're talking, I've got about 1 million questions.
Sorry.
No, not at all, because I'm thinking I need to ask her this, I need to ask her this.
Yeah.
And of course, people who are watching, if you want to call in, please do call in. You're watching us live on www, of course at the moment, but we are on www.facebook.com/uctv.co.uk and YouTube. Our website is www.uctv.co.uk, and of course, you can also call on our studios on 01254 413 1188. And if there's a question that you want to ask Sarah, please feel free. It is free, actually. Do ask us. But what I wanted to ask you is that, is there really a big problem with young people and mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're in an epidemic, to be honest.
Really?
And I think the situation is really hitting crisis point, unfortunately. There is so many elements now that are contributing to young people's mental health difficulties. There's so many different factors and stressors within our lives generally, that unfortunately more and more young people are experiencing and suffering various different symptoms of mental illness. A whole different spectrums, and I feel like the services are oversubscribed, the waiting lists are only getting longer and longer, and young people having to wait longer to access meaningful services, meaning that by the time they are getting to the services they require, their needs are greater, their risks are higher, and their mental health difficulties are more acute in nature.
Sarah, what is causing this? I mean, is it because 21st century and there's a lot of stress? Why are young people who should be, to be very honest, thinking about their education, their future, and yet they are, surrounded by mental health issues?
Absolutely, and the issues that our young people are facing are several issues, and they're not they're complex and they're multi-layered, and some of the key sort of trends and the key things that we're seeing is that as parents we all have high expectations of our children. We all want our children to succeed. We know that life can be difficult, but by doing that sometimes we can apply pressure to our young people, sometimes even subconsciously, and often doing it in a way and we think it's in their best interest because we want them to achieve, we want them to be the best. But by doing that, what we're doing is that we are applying pressure in a nature that then is making them feel stressed. They are having to invest so much time in education, extracurricular activities. We've got all the pressures of social media that we never used to have historically. Peer pressure, Instagram, looking at what your peers are doing. This person's gone on holiday and have got these new trainers that cost hundreds of pounds, and they're wanting to achieve these things that may be unrealistic within their reality and within their life.
It's making me feel very guilty, as a mother. It really is. It's just really hit me that, my goodness, are we really doing that to our children?
I think that it's all about balance, and I think whilst it is important to motivate our children and it is important to let them achieve their optimum and encourage them in the best way that we can, I think that also needs to be balanced with allowing children to be children. They need to have the opportunity to be able to have downtime, to be able to relax, to be able to not think about life stresses, to have time in the fresh air, going out for walks, not being attached to these electronic devices all of the time. I think another thing that's really important as well is that I feel like we need to normalise having conversations with our young people and our children about how are they feeling, checking in with them, how are they doing. Let's not just take it for granted that they are doing all right. They may go through the motions, they may get up, go to school, give their homework in, but the pressures are there, they're real, children are struggling with it, and as parents we should be saying to them, are you okay, are you feeling okay, are you stressed about anything, and having them conversations and making them normal within the family environment.
What are the I've just made a note here about the symptoms you're talking about. It's so difficult to define mental health. What are the symptoms?
So for me, I would say mental health is, it's not necessarily defined in one core context. Mental health is about what it means to the individual. So it's about how that person is feeling. So in terms of a spectrum, you know, me and you could have the same traumatic experience. Yeah, we could walk out of here, we could have the same trauma, and we could both go our separate ways, and you may have the resilience and the built-in mechanisms to be able to get over that and recover in a manner where you don't need to have symptoms and mental health difficulties or additional support other than perhaps your family saying, you know, are you okay? I said, whereas I may go out of there, walk out of the same trauma and start to not have that same support network. I may internalise them experiences, and then I may start to develop things like, you know, anxiety, ruminating thoughts, not being able to sleep. So each individual person, how they experience life and things that are going on around them, it will manifest in a development in different ways in different people. So I suppose, you know, when we say what is mental health, there is, like I said, a whole different spectrum. But I think another thing that's really important to mention is that we need to look at what also is normal and separate that from a mental illness.
What is normal?
So what's normal is that it's normal to get angry. It's normal to be sad. You know, it's normal to be anxious in certain situations. So if I'm going to go and sit an exam and I really want to pass that exam, it's normal for me to feel anxious. You know, we need to look at it in context of our situation, because although mental health at the moment is, you know, it's out there, it's, you know, it's becoming an epidemic, it's hitting a crisis point. We also need to understand as well that that doesn't mean that everybody's got it. If you experience a bit of an anxiety pre-test, or if you know, get angry because you've had an argument with your friend. So we also need to be mindful that we're not medicalising every single emotion and every single experience. We need to make sure that it's in context. So if somebody's experiencing bouts of anxiety and it becomes more persistent, it affects somebody's functioning, so that's another thing that we need to think about, then it becomes problematic. Somebody may live their entire life with anxiety and you may never even really know, because they self-manage. They have breathing techniques. They have ways to be able to manage their stress levels. And if that's the case, then, but they do everything they need to do. The next person may have anxiety that's so debilitating, they can't eat, they can't sleep, they can't leave the house. So those are the things that we need to consider when we're talking about what is mental illness, what does it mean to that person, and how does it affect them?
Is there a gender imbalance here? Are men more prone to mental health, or women, or is there no difference?
No, I wouldn't say necessarily there's any significant difference. I think they present in different ways. I think that the difficulty that's been historically, that you would say perhaps it was more prevalent in females, but we don't think that it actually is. It's just that males are more unlikely to talk about it. So there's stigma attached to it. So a male or a boy would be less likely to vocalise that they are having feelings of anxiety or low mood or wanting to harm themselves. Whereas what we know is that girls, young females, they're more likely to be able to have that conversation with somebody. So the figures at some points looked a little bit skewed, but what we're starting to realise now with all the big national campaigns that are out there, and with all the publicity about all of these mental health charities and support networks, that the divide is becoming less, and that males are being supported, encouraged more to talk about their mental health difficulties.
You talked about the symptoms. You sort of helped me to understand what mental health can be. What you provide, is that just for Blackburn, because of course we are in Blackburn, or do you go into Lancashire, or can anybody call you and say, look, I need help?
So anyone can call us in terms of our private consultations, and obviously we will assess based on each individual case. But also more recently, we have recently within the last week opened our therapeutic placement for young people. So over the last 2 years we've been planning and developing. It's the first in the country of its type. There is nothing else in the country that does what our model has done, and we we have a 4-bedded therapeutic placement in Darwin for young people with acute mental health difficulties to come and receive intensive psychological intervention and assessment.
Sarah, tell me, is there, when I think about mental health, I come from the Pakistani community, and I always feel that we don't talk about mental health. We seem to brush it under the carpet or the table, whatever you like to call it, and there's a stigma attached to
Absolutely,
that.
yeah.
Do you feel that's still prevalent?
I do. I feel that in the Asian community, I feel it's still there, but I definitely feel like it's getting better, and it's improving. So, Asian and Pakistani families tend to be very close-knit. They are very family orientated. They have large extended families, and they very much care and look after each other. And they see that it's their job and their responsibility to care for their family or for their elders or for their younger people within their family. So what's happened historically is that if there's been any sort of signs or symptoms of any initial mental health concerns, rather than asking for help or finding out what it is, there's been a tendency for them to want to kind of keep it in-house, and this is our responsibility. We will look after this person. But I think it is becoming more and more common now that families are being more confident in being able to have them conversations and seeking help, because ultimately the message has always been that the earlier we can intervene and the early intervention that we can put in place, the prognosis is better. So whereas somebody may start with small periods of anxiety, whereas we can easily support and manage that, but when they're presenting at a point when they've got acute anxiety, where they're almost immobilised because they can't, get out of the house and they can't function, it's a lot more difficult and tricky to treat. So that's the message that kind of services have been trying to put out, and I do feel like it's definitely improving, although there is still some work to do.
Yeah. You talked about an intervention that is very important, that we get to the root before before it becomes too messy. I just want you to talk about this stress impact. We talked about earlier that young people have a lot of stress. They have to live up to certain expectations, and when you were talking that, I was feeling terribly guilty as a mother, thinking, oh my God, I'm driving my son mad because I expect him to have done XYZ by XYZ time frame. So that is impacting, but that has always been there, hasn't it? I mean, if I think back about my time, my father expected me to be able to do that by this time. What's the difference?
I think that there's definitely more pressure being put on pupils now via schools because they are target driven. So they are funded financially, and looked at their targets, their grades that their pupils are achieving, their attendance, and all those kind of things are the outcomes that they need to achieve to get graded, to be in these outstanding kind of pots where they get more money, etc. And for that reason, the teachers are applying additional pressure, as well as the parents, to the pupils, not only because they do, well, I'd like to think they want their pupils to succeed, but also because they're target driven and they want the outcomes for their school. And it's more stressful now for a young person in a high school than I think that it's ever been. And from a personal experience, my own daughter's 16 and she's just gone through her mocks and is building up to her GCSEs, and she has never displayed any symptoms of stress or anxiety. She's always been a very confident, go-lucky girl. She's loves her sport, she's popular, and she's never had any issues. And she recently has just gone through her mocks, and she really, really struggled. She applied so much pressure to herself as well. So she's putting her own expectations up there, and revising into the night, missing sleep, missing meals. And I saw it with my own eyes, my own daughter, that how they can get into this spiral and into this rut. I just think as parents we need to be mindful and watching our kids and keeping an eye on them and making sure that they are staying healthy and doing all of those things like getting good sleep, eating well, exercising, taking a break, and having them conversations with them. We want you to do well, of course we do, we'll support you whenever we can, but you can only do what you can do. Your best is your best, and we are happy with that.
So good to be able to hear that, although as you said, we understand that, as a mother, and I keep saying as a mother, but your hard work does it come against a brick wall? Because we're talking about the elephant in a big room, a system where they're driven through assessment, right? And you talk about targets. But if that is not changing, you are constantly going to be challenged, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is tricky, and that's why I think it's the role and responsibility of the parents and the carers now to be able to take some of that from the young person and be able to say to them, we believe in you and your best is your best, your optimum is your optimum. That's not based against the targets of what the school are saying. I had parents' evening last week and I was told, oh, your child's flight path is 7 but they're only achieving a 5. I said, hang on a second, the flight path was given from SATs when they were in primary school. I said, my daughter's 16 now, the flight path means nothing to me because what I'm interested in is the here and now. What's her best and what's her optimum in the here and now? I know she's revising, I know she's taking it seriously, she wants to do well, and if that's what her optimum is, fantastic, I'm happy with that.
But you verbalized that because you understood the system. You were able to say that. But what happens to those parents, those poor mums and poor dads who don't understand the system? They want their children to do well, but I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't understand the system.
The system is tricky, the system is complicated, whether it's the education system, the health system, they are complicated. But what I would say is that, be interested not just in your young person, but have them conversations with teachers. They do want to help, and they do want to support their pupils. Go in, have them conversations, take somebody with you if you feel like you're not getting the information that you need, and try and understand the grade system so that you can support your child with it.
It's tricky, isn't it?
It's absolutely really tricky. It is tricky, but I feel like it's not going to get any better. No one's going to wake up and say, all right, we've changed our mind now over these grades and this system and the education and all the rest of it. So what we need to do is we need to build resilience. We need to brace ourselves and build resilience for our young people and as our family units and know what's to be expected, and then be prepared for it rather than just bury our heads in the sand.
Absolutely. Just a quick reminder, this is a community platform on uctv.co.uk, and today we're talking about mental health with young people and of course generically what happens. We're talking to Sarah Beaumont, of course, who works with Associated Wellbeing. And if there are any questions, please call us on 01254 413 118. You can send us questions. And before I forget, if you have any marketing questions, please call us or send us an email on sales@uctv.co.uk, and of course gender inquiries on enq@uctv.co.uk. Sarah, this is such a wide subject, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Tell me, do you feel that within the Asian community here, let's say, because we're sitting in Blackburn, how helpful has the community been itself to open up to say, I think we have an issue and we want you to help us?
Yeah, I think it's been surprising really, particularly in relation to our private consultations, where there's been a large proportion of Asian families that have contacted us, and more recently I've just worked with 2 local Asian families and their young person, and a massive part of that work for us has actually been about actually working with the families. So rather than working just in isolation with the young person that's got the difficulties, I would say in most cases it's about us working and educating and supporting the family to support their young person in a more meaningful way. So if we exclude the family members and just work with the young person, then often things don't get resolved. So it's been really refreshing really for us, and it's been really nice that there has been local Asian families that have contacted us and reached out and kind of said, we are struggling, we don't understand what's going on. We had one family where their daughter was self-harming, where she was getting into difficulty in school, into fights. They were a very religious family, and they couldn't relate to it at all. They were like, what's happened? What have we done wrong? We read our prayers, we read our Quran, we do everything we should be doing, and now all of a sudden we've got our daughter who seems to have So rather than, working direct with the young person, for us, it was really about educating the family and getting them to understand her story, where she was coming from, what her stresses are, what can they do to help her, what she needs from them, because they didn't know. And sometimes, although as parents our intentions are good, sometimes we can do the opposite of actually what's needed. So sometimes it's more about facilitating them conversations, educating, as well as just direct work with young people.
Do you believe that family breakdown is a challenge, and that actually also impacts a child's, because if you have a family that's broken down, if you have a fragmented family, that impacts a child generally. It would. Do you think that could also cause problems?
So what we know about mental illness within young people is that we look at the historical, what we call predisposing factors, which may have affected where they're at currently and what their presentation is, and a significant amount. And where we sort of specialise in the areas that we look at is attachment issues and trauma. So early childhood trauma and early childhood attachment issues. So these are factors and things like where a child has been in a situation where they have witnessed or exposed domestic violence, drugs and alcohol within the family unit. So it could even be things like divorce. So, it could be that there's been a difficult and tricky divorce, and then the young person's experienced an attachment difficulty with the parent that's been absent because they've not developed that rapport and that bond. And then later out in life, it manifests itself in some sometimes complex mental health difficulties. And us as practitioners, what we have to do is that we have to assess them in a manner where we really get to understand the historical factors, the root cause, the things that really would have affected their ability to cope later on in life. So yeah, absolutely. There are family things that do go on that do have a negative effect sometimes on young people.
The Muslim religious community, the Muslim community here, do you feel that there's some reservation within some communities where they don't want to indulge in these conversations because they may feel that mental health itself is sometimes we get it so very wrong within Muslim communities as well as other religious communities that they can resolve that through their own practices.
Yeah,
do you ever find that?
Absolutely. So it's taboo, and then we also have, the other element to it is that, we all know that people sometimes can say, oh, it's jinn, so Islamically, it's jinn, they've been possessed. So sometimes, unfortunately, you could have somebody who is really quite psychotic and unwell, and actually you've got a family that are saying, oh no, they're possessed, and they want to do some kind of exorcism or some kind of religious procedures to be able to support that person. But for me, I think it's about the combination of things, because what we don't want to do is we do not want to dismiss or disregard people's religious and cultural beliefs, because they are important, very important, and having a sense of belonging and having a religion and having a family are all part of someone's recovery and can be a very positive thing. However, what we need to do is that we just need to be open-minded, and we need to also have conversations and consider and embrace the other side of things, which would be either medication or psychological intervention. So it's not one size fits all. Don't do all of the medication and none of the religious aspects, praying or the family support. It's about doing them both. And we've had some really successful outcomes working with Asian families in the community where they've had really quite unwell people within their families. But by working together and embracing, the religious element of it, really encouraging, the prayer and the community coming together, but then also as well, whilst introducing maybe medication, psychological interventions. And it's about doing things in combination.
Because when you talked about jinns and things like that, I just wondered whether there is some reservation from the community to say, because we can resolve this ourselves, we don't need anything else, because that would then impact you not being able to do that work with that child.
Yeah, absolutely, and that does happen. Like I said, I feel like it's becoming less, which is good, and it's a positive thing. I feel like our local community are becoming more open-minded in terms of looking at other avenues of support for their loved one. However, it does still happen within families where they feel like it is through a jinn or being possessed, that's where their illness is manifested from. But it's about, if you show that compassion and that level of understanding, and you go in having an understanding about where they're coming from and not dismissing it, then you're going to be able to be welcomed more into that family. If you go in with an opinion, oh, you're wrong, what you're saying is wrong, your religious stuff, this person's psychotic, they're unwell, we're going to medicate them, they're going to tell you to get out the door. But it's about your approach, it's about your level of understanding. And for me, for mental health practitioners, particularly working in local areas where we have a very high Muslim population, it's important that we understand their values, their culture, their core religious views, so that we can be empathetic, we can understand, we can show compassion, and we can support them in that element, because we do know that faith and prayer and all of those things are and can be very positive, and we need to embrace that.
It's very important what you just said, is that, but you have that knowledge, okay? So do you think that all the practitioners will need to be trained to understand their religious communities?
I think they
should. Does that actually happen?
No, I think that we probably do have quite a few practitioners that are Muslim anyway. So I think what tends to happen is that if they are working with a family who are Muslim, then basically they will get one of their colleagues to step in.
Okay, there are some questions coming in, and I just wondered if I could put this, because one of the questions is, how can we help prevent suicide?
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a very complex question. How can we prevent suicide? And ultimately, unfortunately, a lot of times when people do complete suicide, there is little that actually somebody could have or could have done, because once they have got it in their mindset that is the only way out, they often do it and not tell anybody at all, and it's very, very sad. But there is certainly signs and symptoms that we can be mindful of and that we can be aware of that may make us be more suspicious about how somebody's feeling. And it's simple things, really. It's about having open and honest conversations. It's about being transparent. It's about being aware about your loved one or your friends. What are they normally like? Are they acting out of character? Are they withdrawing from you? Are they sending you some kind of message where you think they're acting out of ordinary? And it's about being able to have them conversations and offering that olive branch and saying, are you okay? I've noticed that you've been acting like this recently. Is there anything I can do to help you? Sometimes that person who's feeling like there is nothing else left for them and that the only way out of this is to end their life, sometimes you being that person that asks that question, are you all right? Sometimes you are the person that makes the difference. So it is simple, but I think by having them conversations, being aware of the people that we have around us that we know, and asking those questions, I think that's probably one of the biggest, most fundamental things that we can do.
I can see that this kind of conversation can take place with the teachers at school, right? I'm just wondering whether the Muslim, and I'm particularly talking about the Muslim child here who goes to madrasa for 2 hours every evening, do we provide some kind of training to the staff of the madrasas to say, you may be able to pick up some signs that not have been picked up at a school?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you do any work with the religious communities in that sense?
So we don't, but there is a really fantastic charity and organisation within Blackburn called IMO. I don't know if you've heard of them, the Inter-Madrasa organisation, and they have their own mental health practitioner within their organisation, and they specifically work with young people from the Asian backgrounds, and they go into mosques and Islamic schools and they do a lot of the education work with them, and they do a fantastic piece of work, and we link in with them and we work closely with them, and if there's pockets of work that we can pick up, because we are fortunate, we do have myself, I'm a Revert, I have obviously an understanding of Islam. My colleague, she's a Revert, believe it or not, and we do also have several Pakistani, Gujarati speaking practitioners practitioners within our team as well. So we are keen to be able to make sure that we access, you know, and have the resources to be able to support families, you know, both Asian and not, you know, within our local community.
I mean, Associated Wellbeing seems to be doing such a lot of good work here in Blackburn. I'm just wondering, what about other areas?
Yeah.
Do they have something similar?
Obviously,
let's say Accrington or Burnley or Pendle.
So we do work and cover those areas as well. We do work within some schools within Burnley as well. So it's kind of more of a Lancashire footprint, and we take referrals from Lancashire. Although we do take referrals from outside of Lancashire, we are very keen. We are local people. I live in Blackburn with Darwin, and although I wasn't born and bred here, I'm very passionate about my local community. I feel very much like this is home for me, and what we were very keen to do was to set up a really unique bespoke service locally for local people. So we don't want our children to have to, you know, travel miles and miles to access services, or if they need a placement to have to go down south and be, you know, hours away from their families and carers. And hence why, you know, we set up the Lighthouse, which is our therapeutic hub, because we wanted young people to have a high quality service within our local community.
Sarah, how can people contact you? You know, I mean, people who are either listening or probably watch something, you know, on YouTube. How can they contact you?
So we have a website. So our website is www.associatedwellbeing.
Can you, sorry, say that again?
www.associatedwellbeing.co.uk.
Well, I'll repeat that again. www.associatedwellbeing.co.uk.
Yeah.
Do you have a contact telephone number at all?
Yes, we do have a contact telephone number. It's 07919
07919
53
53
11
11
97.
97. We will leave these details in the comments, and I will repeat the phone number and of course the website. But it is important that if you feel that maybe you need any help, please contact Sarah Beaumont, and we will leave the telephone number. I will just give you the number very quickly again. It's www.associatewellbeing.co.uk, and the telephone number is 07919 53 1197. We will leave that telephone number. Call in confidence, and I'm sure that you will get all the help you can get. That's what we're here for. Sarah, what I wanted to ask you was that, you know, that question is gone. It was really there and it's just gone. But I'm sure it will come back.
Okay.
I'm sure it will come back.
Okay.
So I understand mental health better. I understand the need of the young person much better than I did an hour ago.
Great.
What I would like to know is that, are you doing something for, let's say, refugees who have come from war-torn areas? Because we do have lots of people from Syria, we have people from other parts of the world who are, you know, who we've been welcomed in UK.
Absolutely.
Do you provide any help for that kind of stress management?
Yeah, absolutely, and we would do. I mean, up until now, we have not had any refugees or young people from Syria, etc., that's been referred into our service. So whether they are coming under an NHS service and being supported via them through a different strand, maybe that might be the case. But yeah, absolutely. You know, we would be able to look at putting, you know, support in place for any young person.
The reason why I ask is because we do have quite a few families, maybe not in Blackburn, but we certainly have it in Lancashire, that's talking about Burnley and Fleetwood and Blackpool. They're carrying a lot of luggage, and I often wonder whether that sometimes when there's conflict within home environment, that's the impact and the stress that they're feeling, and wonder, so can they contact you individually, or would their caseworker need to contact you?
Yeah, they can contact us for advice. We are a private service, unfortunately, so we are still trying to navigate and battle our way through some of the funding streams, because as we know, you know, everyone wants a service but nobody wants to pay.
I know.
So that is unfortunately, sadly, an ongoing issue for us. But nevertheless, we are still more than happy to support support people in any way that we can, even if that means in terms of signposting. We've got really good links within the community with all the local services, NHS, charities, and, you know, we're more than happy for people to contact us and ask us for our advice, and, you know, we will signpost them, point them in the right direction, or you know, give them whatever advice we can. So
well, there you have it. You know, please call Sarah, and we will leave the details for you, but it is important, and I think we need to protect not only our children but our communities, and I'm sure that when you call Sarah, she will be able to give you advice. There are questions on the Facebook, so I'm going to Sarah, could have a quick look. You know, I'm not very good with technology here. Really difficult, very difficult for me, technology.
Yeah, don't ask me.
Do you know, this is something about women in technology. I'm not saying that women are no good at technology. I'm just saying I am no good at technology. I could get killed for saying this live, couldn't I?
That's next week's talk, women in technology.
Yeah, I know, no, let's not get, but there are some questions that are being posed, but I'm just having difficulty finding the question. But I'm sure that one of my wonderful colleagues is going to help me with all that. Okay, so let's say that I am a teacher and that I have a student. Would I call you directly? Would I go through the social services?
Yeah.
What do I do?
So if there is a teacher in school, then they have pathways already in school to escalate concerns about a young person's health and well-being, which they will be trained as part of their safeguarding to know exactly what those pathways are. So they would escalate it either via social services for advice, or they would contact the local mental health team. So we do have a fantastic local mental health team that's run by the NHS. There's a CAMS service and an LCAS service, and they provide all the statutory services, community and inpatient services to young people. However, unfortunately, they have quite significant waiting lists. They have limited resources and lots and lots of young people trying to access their service. So we are kind of an alternative to that. So when families want to be able to access help or support or advice quickly, and don't want to wait the 8 weeks on the NHS or even longer, then they, as an alternative, would be able to contact us and ask for our help and our support via a private route.
I've got a question here that, and we've touched upon it, that Muslims believe in jinns for the health issues as well, and that seems to be a struggle for a lot of people. How do you deal with that? Because if the Muslims are saying, well, you know, it's a jinn problem, what are you going to do with it? You're not going to be able to deal with it. How do you deal with that?
Again, it's about psychoeducation. That's what we call it, and it's a large part of our role. It's about developing what we call a therapeutic rapport. So it's about developing trust within the family and within the community, to get them to understand that we're coming from a perspective where we do want to help. We want to be able to understand their perspective and where they're coming from, but ultimately we want the best outcomes for that person who's unwell. And sometimes it can take longer. It's not a straightforward process in some cases where you can go in, assess them, say we think this is what the issue and this is the treatment. You know, it's about having a different approach, taking into consideration, you know, the family unit, what their belief systems are, you know, what they're saying, and having that awareness of their religious and cultural beliefs, like I said before, really. And that approach tends to work. And you know, if you're coming in from the perspective or from an avenue of, I understand what you're saying, and we think it is really, really important about that side and that element of you know, belief and religion and prayer and doing it in combination, like I said, with medical treatments as well. Right,
so you're offering them, so there's got to be some communication, because a lot of Muslims believe in ruqyah, you know, their prayers and everything. Would you work one-to-one, or would you work with one-to-one?
I think a lot of the time is that you have to get the family on board beforehand, because often they are, and sometimes the elders within the family as well, they are the ones that hold the highest influence over the situation. So it's about trying to work out who's who within the family, who's the one that's going to have the highest influence over the situation, and really starting to try and open up that dialogue with them and have them conversations and say, okay, the most important thing in all of this is that person, the person who you love and care about, and about getting them in a position where they are back to how they used to be, and having them open and honest conversations, but like I said, letting them know that you've got an understanding of where they're coming from and not dismissing it. Who are we, even if it's a non-Muslim practitioner or someone who doesn't know about the religion or them beliefs, they might think, oh gosh, what, jinn, they're possessed, are these people crazy? They're crazy, they need medication and that's it. If they're going in with that attitude, the barriers are going to come down straight away. They're not going to want to engage with this person. They're going to say, get out the house, you don't understand what's happening here, we're going to deal with it ourselves. So it's all about your approach, it's all about your level of understanding and the information that you have.
You're quite an asset, aren't you, really? When you think, seriously, when you think about it, because you walking in, you understand the Muslim community, you understand the needs, you also understand the challenges that they have. I'm sure that if you did not have all that awareness, that conflict would be there, wouldn't it?
I think absolutely. I think there's some people that's better for some positions than other, and for me, fortunately, I have got the the best of both worlds, because I have been a Christian and I understand it from our white British background, because that's where I was brought up and I grew up. But then I am a revert, and I have been for the last 22 years. So I also have a good understanding and awareness about Islam, about also cultures, particularly Pakistani cultures. So for me, I am able to kind of go in and have that kind of common ground, I suppose. But there are a lot of practitioners within Blackburn with Darwen and surrounding areas that also have the same level of understanding, or are, Muslim born, and they would come in from that perspective. And I think what tends to happen is that, like I said, if somebody that didn't have that level of understanding was allocated to that case and they were struggling, they'd refer it on to a colleague.
Have you ever faced a challenge from the community to say, well, what would you know?
No, I think typically by the time we've got involved, a lot of the time, they're the ones that are asking for our help. They understand that their loved one is unwell, so there's some point that they are wanting to get a solution to their problem. And I found generally that when, particularly with Asian families, once I've kind of said to them, Assalamu alaikum, I don't know everything, but I am a revert and I do know a bit. That is definitely an asset for me, because a lot of Asian families will say, oh, mashallah, and I get kind of a pretty warm welcome, and then that makes them kind of think, okay, perhaps we will kind of listen to her. So I think for me personally, I have been quite fortunate, because I've kind of got that secret weapon, really.
Well, it's an icebreaker, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And people, they are intrigued, a lot of the time, they wouldn't necessarily know unless I kind of, bring it up, but, which I'm more than happy to, and I will always, greet people with Assalamu alaikum, and that really does kind of make people, I think, develop that rapport easier.
I'm so tempted to forget about the mental health issue at the moment and let's talk about your journey. But we're going to have that conversation, okay? Because of course we're going to invite Sarah back, and I've got it publicly now, Sarah. It's been stamped that she's going to come back and she's going to talk to us about her journey. That would be really interesting. I think that would be interesting. But we're going to finish. We're just going to a couple of more questions that I'm really interested in with the mental health. Do you have any statistics? Because I remember a few years ago, we were talking about mental health, and Blackburn, and particularly from the Asian female, ranked really high. Really high.
I don't have any particular statistics, but what I do know from recent conversations is that I know that over the Christmas period there was a high proportion of Asian females that were looking for residential placements for young people who couldn't remain at home for complex reasons, and also for mental health difficulties.
Christmas period.
So over the Christmas period, the local authorities were looking for placements for some particular young Asian females, and were finding it very, very tricky and very difficult to do so.
Any reason? I mean, a reason why?
It's complex because there's lots of different elements. We call it what's called the biopsychosocial model. So it's about looking at biological, social factors and psychological factors. So there's lots of things going on for people, and when you've got all of them elements, then often, unfortunately, things can break down and it ends up in crisis, where it means that it's not safe for the young person to remain at home, unfortunately, and they have to be, removed from their home placement. And it is very, very tricky. It's very difficult to find appropriate support and placements for these young people because it just doesn't exist, or it's oversubscribed. There's no beds available. So it is really sad.
There comes a point in mental health where people can be sectioned. Is that
absolutely,
correct?
Yes.
That's so very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I remember, is it Section 17?
So that's the leave, Section 17 leave.
Yeah.
So there are sections that can be used. So that means when somebody doesn't have capacity, or when their risks are so high that they need to be restricted in an environment where they need to be, protected for their own safety. And then they would be admitted into an inpatient unit under either a Section 2, which is an assessment order, or a Section 3, which is a treatment order. And my background is working on wards. I worked on acute wards, psychiatric intensive care wards, and assessment wards for the last 10 years. So that's kind of where my background lies. But I moved into working in the community and with young people because I'm really, really keen to kind of look at the early intervention approach, because I feel that if we can support our young people to be resilient, to empower them to have really good positive coping strategies, then it's going to reduce the risk of them having to then access adult services or services in the future.
This is I don't know where the time has gone, by the way. I've still got 6 more questions that I wanted to ask you, so I'm not sure where the time is gone, but I want to ask one final question.
Yeah.
What's the solution?
So
it's a $6 million question,
it is,
Sarah.
Absolutely, and I think if I had the solution, then I'd probably be a very rich person. I think it's a complicated, complex issue. I think there are lots of things that can be done locally and nationally to be able to address the issue. I think early intervention is key. If we invest in our young people now, support them to be resilient, help them to manage stress through schools, etc., then I think we stand a chance to have a population as they grow up to be able to, withhold some of those life stresses that are inevitable. I think there needs to be more of a financial investment to mental health services, but particularly young people's services. And I think coming internally from a home environment, from families, from parents and carers, I think it's about the solution and what can we do is ask those questions, check in with our kids, find out, empathise with them. We know it's really tough, it's really tricky at school, but we're there for you. Is there anything I can do? Do you need anything from me? Let's not just take it for granted that our kids are okay. Let's ask the questions.
I'm going to ask you a question, which is, and I'm going to deviate from mental health. It's an important question. Do you think that the role of a woman in our 21st century has contributed to the state that we're in, where are we neglecting our young people? Have they become, mother isn't there to look after them because she's too busy earning money? Do you think there's an element of that?
I think it's all about balance at the end of the day.
How do you balance when a mum has to work to earn a living?
It is tricky, but then there's the same said for that actually by a young person seeing that their mum going out to work, having a career and doing all of those things can be a positive role model for that young person. It can be someone for them to aspire to look up to and to think, look at my mum, she's able to still have a career and earn money and be able to parent at the same time.
And be exhausted at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Come on, Sarah.
Yes.
We're doing 2 jobs. We only paid for one.
Absolutely. So no, I personally don't think that you have to be a stay-at-home mum to be able to bring up a child successfully and for them to not potentially have any difficulties or issues. I don't think that that's the way forward. I think it's about, in everything in life, it's about creating a healthy balance, and I think that we are very able to multitask as women.
Oh,
we
absolutely.
do it very well.
Sarah, we're not denying that at all, but it's exhausting.
It is exhausting, but I think that's why God gave us them skills, unlike men.
Absolutely. You're definitely coming back, Sarah.
Yeah.
You're definitely coming back. Sarah, I'm very grateful to you, but I don't know what this 1 hour has gone.
I know.
It's just flown. It has just. Thank you so much.
No,
It's been, just to conclude that Sarah Beaumont can be contacted on 07919531197 and on www.associatedwellbeing.co.uk. We discussed that early intervention is very important. We discussed that stress management is also very important, and we as mothers were going to play a pivotal role in helping our children. We will be back next week, but before I finish, please follow us on Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can be notified of our streams and uploads. Community platform is only, of course, available on Ummah Community TV, and I want to thank our sponsors once more, who are First Stop Vehicle Solutions, SG9 Security, companyforsale.co.uk, First Qibla Tours, Brown Hill Corporate Hire, Longreach Coaches, Executive Travel, and of course we do not forget Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, it's a
and
pleasure.
of course, the more you support us, the more we can bring. Until next week, look after yourself and your neighbour, whoever they may be. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.